Thank you for coming out. And at this moment, I'm going to introduce our awesome moderator, Ms. Amara Inya. Many of you may be familiar with her wonderful work in the Austin community with the Austin Chamber of Commerce, and she is also a former candidate of this great city of Chicago for mayor. So I want to introduce Ms. Amara Inya.
Thank you, Ramel. I also want to thank the NAACP for hosting this forum, as well as to thank Bethel New Life for allowing us to use the facility. And thank you to all of you for coming out to hear from the candidate and hopefully get some of the questions that you have answered in this debate as we all prepare, if you have not already done so, as we all prepare to make an informed decision to vote. Just a couple of ground rules that I want to lay, and then I'll hand it over to our panelists. So this is a timed forum, as the candidate will have 1 minute to respond to every question. We have a timekeeper who will be sitting in front. The green is an indicator that there are 30 seconds left, and the red means that time has stopped. Again, we'll have people circulating throughout the audience to collect the index cards that you should write your questions on them. She will collect those questions and make sure that I get them and can read them off throughout the course of the forum. We'll have questions that will be presented by the panelists. And again, just reiterating that this is a respectful discussion and that we want to preserve an air of respectability in this room and make sure that we're able to hear fully from our candidate. With that said, I want to give the panelist an opportunity to introduce herself before we dive into the forum. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, beautiful neighbors of the 37th Ward. Thank you so much to Bethel for your hospitality, and thank you to the NAACP for being invested in the critical conversations that we must engage in to determine the future of our communities and cities. So thank you so much for standing in the gap as you have for so many years. My name is Tara Stamps. And as a classroom teacher who got her start in the 37th Ward, I have just watched how neglect, disinvestment has devastated our city and specifically our community. And under the leadership of Rahm Emanuel and Emma Mitz, it has only gotten worse. Regrettably, we now have the title of the most violent neighborhood in the city of Chicago. We have seniors who are afraid to come out of their homes, who are basically prisoners in their own homes. Recently, last summer, my block party was canceled because we were scared of retaliatory shooting. We have an unemployment rate, which is Great Depression numbers. Over 30% of the people in our community are either unemployed or underemployed. I mean, that's 1 in 3 people. There's a direct relationship between violence and unemployment. And finally, our schools, where our babies are, that deserve the best that this city has to offer, is quite frankly being left behind. Resources and money are just leaving our schools at an alarming rate. And quite honestly, we just deserve better. So I have thrown my hat into this ring because I will work every day to fight tirelessly to reduce the violence in our community, to make sure that we really invest in our economic corridors, that we bring back work to our community that's a livable wage, that we protect the pensions of our neighbors who have already worked and put their money away depending on their defined benefit, and that we make sure that our community schools get all the resources that they need so that we can make sure that our children graduate ready as global citizens to inherit this world that they will indeed inherit, but that they are prepared. So really this conversation, this fight, is about a neighborhood that we deserve, and quite frankly, we deserve better.
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello.
Are you ready?
I am.
Okay. Question 1. In past years, many aldermen and city council have been criticized for consistently voting with the mayor, in some cases 100% of the time. Many believe these question the independence of local aldermen. From your perspective, what should be the relationship between the alderman and the mayor, and how can residents be assured you are representing their interests? You have 1 minute to answer this question. You will hire me. You can fire me. My relationship and my responsibility is to you first and foremost. I am not bought by anyone or any entity. I am unbossed by any entity. The only people that I have to be responsible for are the neighbors and the citizens of the 37th Ward. And for every decision that must be made as it pertains to the governance and the health and the viability of our community, I will be transparent and informative on a regular basis. It will not be how do you say, like one of those terms, now beyond rubber stamp, which is despicable, because quite honest, they do us a disservice. That their responsibility is to us first and to the mayor. That is a relationship that they have to work on, because honestly, we're supposed to have the same shared vision, that we have a healthy city in all communities. That should be the relationship between the alderman and the mayor, that we are working for the same goal, and that is to ensure that every community in the city of Chicago is safe.
Access to information is critical for residents to know what's going on in the ward. What specific mechanisms will you utilize to ensure that residents of the 37th Ward are notified about important information, updates, and events taking place in the ward? You have 1 minute to answer.
There's no excuse to not be informed. We have every medium available to make sure that our neighbors are apprised of everything at a moment's notice. To ensure that I will have a robust social media page. I will have a website that's specifically for all of the issues and necessities and needs of residents of the 37th Ward. I will bring back a regular newsletter that will talk about all of the key points. I will have a regular ward meeting, and in addition to having a regular ward meeting, I will be dividing the ward into segments so that I can rotate and be closer to my neighbors on a regular basis. In addition to that, I will be making sure that we start civic development classes immediately, so our citizens can come and understand what a TIF is, what elected representative school board is, what is a financial transaction tax, what is this language that we are engaged in this political arena that quite often leaves our neighbors behind because they just don't know what is going on. I will take a little mark out of one of my supporters that I'm grateful to have, which is I will and we will inform to empower our community.
Thank you. According to recent articles in the Chicago Sun-Times, the Chicago teachers' contract is currently being negotiated. The Chicago Teachers Union is seeking smaller classes, fewer tests, and a freeze on school closings and turnarounds. Additionally, the CTU wants every school to have a school counselor and sufficient clinicians, a nurse, a truant officer, a restorative justice coordinator, a librarian, playground instructors, and dedicated teachers for art, music, and gym. Do you support these proposals? And if so, how do you propose to finance them?
I support them emphatically. It sounds to me like Chicago public school teachers want for our babies what they see other healthy, vibrant, viable communities having. The travesty is that we have to ask for it. That we have to ask for our children to have wraparound services, which includes a nurse. That we have to ask in a contract fight for us to have resources like books and technology. In the 37th Ward alone, we have 9 schools without a librarian, 8 schools without a technology teacher, yet we boast that we want to graduate world citizens. I tell you what, how about we not send money back to downtown? That's how we can pay for wraparound services. In the 37th Ward alone, we sent back $3 million. Well, I didn't send it back, Ms. Emmett sent it back. $3 million was cut from our budget. You're giving the money away. How about we do something novel, like take the money from the people who actually have it and give it to the people who actually need it? That can come in a myriad of ways. You know, we have so many creative ways to get revenue back into our schools. It's just a failure of imagination that we haven't done so thus far. She has failed us tremendously.
Thank you. Now, the next couple of questions I'm going to ask you are follow-up questions, and they all have a response of yes or no, okay? There are
Excuse me, point of clarity. So you just want me to say yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
There are currently 5,000 empty seats in charter schools. Will you support and advocate for a permanent freeze, at least 30 years, on the commissioning and or creation of new charter and contract schools with public funds?
Yes.
Will you support and advocate for an independent and democratically elected school board representing school districts that are equitably apportioned? Sorry.
Yes.
Well, ask it again. You need to ask it again.
Yeah, because you went kind of fast.
I will slow down.
Please, thank you.
Will you support and advocate for an independent and democratically elected school board representing school districts that are equitably apportioned?
Yes.
Will you sign a letter of support for a elected school the day after you take office as the 37th Ward Alderman?
Will I sign what?
Will you sign a letter of support for a elected school the day after you take office as the 37th Ward?
Elected.
School board, I'm sorry.
Okay, hold on. Will I sign a letter supporting an elected representative school board?
Yes. The day
The
after
day
you
after I
take.
take off? Yes.
Last one. Chicago Public Schools is projecting a $1 billion budget deficit for the 2015-2016 school years. Will you lobby Springfield to lift the school property tax cap, allowing the School Board of Education to raise additional revenues for schools?
The income? Is that what you said?
It is a school property tax cap.
School property tax cap?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Will I lobby Springfield for more money for public schools? Yes.
Well, to lift the cap, to lift the tax cap. So they're going to put a tax cap
Yes.
on, and you want to lift it? Yes?
Yes. I don't know how these questions were crafted, but they are confusing.
Two questions, that's two questions.
That wasn't two questions, but I'll read it again, just so we have clarity, okay?
Okay.
Chicago Public Schools is projecting a $1 billion budget deficit for the 2015-2016 school year. Will you lobby Springfield to lift the school property tax cap, allowing the Chicago Board of Education to raise additional revenues for schools?
So you're saying, will I lobby so they can raise property taxes for schools?
Yes.
No.
We will move in a different direction for now. I want to ask a couple of questions that came from the audience. And these are two questions that are related. The first is, how will you increase the value of this ward? And the second is, what can you do to attract new working homeowners to the 37th Ward? So overall, how would you increase value in the 37th Ward?
By getting people to work. When we work, our communities are safer. To attract anybody to our community and the right kinds of families to our communities, we have to make sure that our communities are safe. When our communities are safe, we can attract new businesses, the desirable businesses that we want, the kind that we leave our neighborhood to go to, preventing all of the economic leakage that comes from our ward because we're going to other places to spend our money. In addition to that, I will use TIF money for beautification projects in our community, making sure that we crack down on businesses that are not good businesses, that they too are invested in our community, and that they have a responsibility to keeping our community clean and neat, and that we use money that's already in the TIF districts in our neighborhood to beautify our neighborhood. Downtown is lit up. We're fighting over streetlights in the 37th Ward. So we need to make sure that we put the money back in our community so that our community are safe and attractive. And when we do that, we can attract the kind of businesses that we want.
Thank you. What is a TIF? That's the follow-up question. There are many in the audience who might not be aware of what tax increment financing is. So can you explain for us, what is a TIF?
A little bit. I'll try to cut across the field on this. Basically, we, as taxpayers, pay our taxes. Then money goes into a slush fund. It wasn't supposed to. There's an overage that goes into a slush fund. It was created by here in Washington, and it was actually to attract businesses to blighted communities. That was its intention. It's now been taken over by people who want to use it to privatize, and really just drive us out of work. But in its inception, it was to help blighted communities like ours. So the question you have about attracting businesses to our community, that money was to be used to do that just thing, in addition to making improvements in our community, so that we in our community can be as viable as other communities in the city.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question in terms of how TIF dollars are used. how would you use that resource to attract businesses? What would be your business development strategy for the 37th Ward?
Okay, I have to go back to this. Before we can attract businesses, we got to make sure our communities are safe. We have a 30% unemployment rate in the 37th Ward right now. That means 1 in 3 of us are out of work. There's a direct relationship between unemployment and violence. We have to make sure that our communities are safe. We got to make sure that our people are working. When we are safe and we are working, we can attract those kind of businesses. Now, why will I use the TIF money? The TIF money is there, as I just pointed out, to invest in businesses. Not to give corporate handouts, but to invest in the businesses, that we already have. There's money in the TIF so that we can have capital improvements for businesses that we already have. I will make sure that I levy all the power and influence of that office and get the money from those 3 TIF. We actually sit on 3 TIF districts in the 37th Ward. That's roughly about $20 million. So there's money here for us to start. But this is the thing. It doesn't matter if we start the business. We have to be able to sustain the business. The way we sustain the business is having our people working and making sure that they have disposable income so that they can patronize the businesses in our community. That is what we must do. We must protect our pensioners. We must protect the pension of our retirees.
You've reached
Thank
time.
you.
All right.
Give us just a moment. Okay. I know, she's giving you a moment to take a drink. The 37th Ward contains a significant amount of vacant warehouse and industrial space. Please give a specific example of how you would propose to reuse some of that space so that it benefits the community. You have 1 minute for this question.
2 things. Innovative small business incubator hub, where people, our neighbors who have ideas and the creativity can have an environment where they can grow and build capacity as small business owners, who will then be able to take that business out of the incubator stage and into our community, thereby redeveloping our economic corridors with homegrown businesses. 1. 2, programs, after school, resources, all kinds of art, music, all of those programs, dance. We have creative young people in our community. We have seniors who are vital in our community. They need a place to grow and go where they can utilize that creativity for the betterment of our entire community. That's 2 of the ways in which I will use the properties.
What is your definition of affordable housing? How will you implement your housing plan to include the current residents of your ward? You have 1 minute, 30 seconds for this question.
Affordable housing is housing you can afford based on your income. Again, it goes back to getting our people working. We have to get our people working, but that's what affordable housing means to me. There's some money coming back to the 37th Ward, $1.3 billion that we're going to have a part of in the Bounce Back program. That's an opportunity to do a couple of things. Match training, train our people to redevelop the properties in our community. So that's a 2-for-1. We not only get people working, we get our people housed in buildings and apartments that they can afford, thereby becoming a part of the fabric of our community. And that's what you do with that. You support people who need support so that they can then stay and become rooted in the communities that they want to stay in. There is no place else for us to go, to be quite honest with you all. We have to fight for our right to stay on the land. We have to fight for our right to have affordable housing. We have to fight for our right to have a livable wage. We have to fight for our right to be safe. So all of those dots are connected, and we need to make sure that it's development without displacement.
Thank you. We received several questions related to education as well as to young people. So the first question is, if you become alderman, how do you plan to work with the young men on the corners as far as jobs and training? You have 1 minute to respond.
Put training programs back in our high schools. Put training programs back in our high schools. It's really simple. It's just a lack of passion and commitment to do so. We know what works for our children. We had a pathway to the middle class that was crafted in part by having programs in our school in industrial work, in craft work, in trade work, where those young people were able to leave, not only get a diploma, but get certification saying they are qualified to work in businesses that will never be replaced by a computer. Again, this is a failure of imagination of our leadership, which has failed us on every level to make sure that our young people have programs that they can actually be wedded to, that will keep them in high school and have them having a pathway to the middle class that we now enjoy right now today. That's what we have to do to get our young people engaged.
Thank you. I'm going to ask that you speak with the mic a little bit farther away to make sure that
Okay,
it's clear.
is this better? 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 Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe that's it. Can you hear me? Yes. Then there's that. Yes. You need it for the recording. I apologize.
So the next question, and you have 1 minute to respond to this question. How are you pushing for high school freshmen to start practicing for the SAT, ACT, and to achieve higher scores on those exams?
How am I pushing? I teach.
Yes.
I don't test. I teach. That's how I'm pushing. The same way your teachers pushed you. Now, if we want to break that down and have our young people test as freshmen for the ACT and the SAT, then don't browbeat them with all of the tests leading up to that. We have to stop testing our children into stupidity and thinking that there's some value of who they are depends on what they get on a test. First, that's what we have to do. We are the only nation that over-tests our people to figure out what they know and what they do not know. In addition to that, as much as we test, we do not try to see how and which way are our babies smart. So that's a critical component that's missing from this diversification and this diversity push in education. How and in what way are our babies smart? I don't mind our children taking tests early for ACT and SAT. I don't mind that at all. What I am opposed to is testing them into stupidity before they get to that point. How about you actually let a teacher teach?
Time, Ms. Stamps. Thank you. For this next question, I'm going to give the audience some background information on what it means, and then I'm going to ask the question to Ms. Stamps. The participatory budgeting process is a process that allows community residents to learn about how the money has been spent in a ward, create proposals for addressing community needs, and then vote on how the money is spent in their ward on an annual basis as it relates to the $1.3 million in menu money. It also allows for the engagement of youth as young as 14 years old to be a part of the voting process if it's agreed upon by the residents and the aldermen. Your question, Ms. Stamp, as it is, yes or no. Would you commit to participatory budgeting in which the community prioritizes and votes on capital projects to be financed through the Aldermanic menu money?
Okay, you said 1 minute and then you said yes or no.
I said this question is only a yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. A follow-up question to that. Outside the $1.3 million in Aldermanic menu money used for ward infrastructure projects, street, lights, speed bumps, etc., what other pots of money would you be open to using in the PBP process? If you're not supportive of the participatory budgeting process, please explain why you're not, but you've already said that you are. And you have 45 seconds for this question.
Again, there is the opportunity in our ward through the 3 TIFs that we've explained that sit in our ward. I'm sorry? There is money available in our ward through the 3 TIFs that our ward actually encompasses. And it's through those pockets of money that I will continue the very laborious work of revitalizing our community. And I will apprise and inform and invite my neighbors to sit down with me on all of those issues so they understand what is at stake, who's asking to come into our community, and why. And what community benefits agreements are they willing to engage in so that we have something on the front end that benefits our community, rather than just selling off our community wholesale in the hopes of low-wage work, because we deserve better.
The alderman often plays a critical role in economic development projects in the ward. What are some measures you would take to ensure local participation in development projects? For example, contracts, employment for residents, community input, etc. You have 1 minute for this question.
All of the above, but we must, that means participation on all levels. That means knowing what the budget is. That means knowing where the money is. But it's in particular, in regards to contracts, really seriously advocating for Black contractors to do work in our community. And that is something that I will advocate for on the front end, making sure that there is an amount, not just a percentage, of Black folks who will get hired on these sites, and more to just wave some flags or hold some flags. We have talented, skilled laborers in our community who need an opportunity to work, to support their families, become a part of the fabric of our community, and reinvest in making our community valuable.
You have previously stated that unemployment in your ward is at 30% or more. For African Americans, that number could possibly even be higher. Please give 2 specific examples of how you will address the unemployment rate in your ward. 1 minute.
First, I'm going to fight for a livable wage. First, I'm going to fight for a livable wage. Rather, I will continue my fight for a livable wage, because I've been on the front line with my brothers and sisters fighting for their right to just be decently paid. In addition to that, I will continue to fight to protect our retirees and their pension. We have to stabilize the work that we have and the income that we have coming into our community as we make our community safe and build for more work. Again, I've talked about the small business laboratories. There are all kinds of opportunities for small businesses to come into our community. It's incumbent upon the office to make sure that we match the resources with our people, that we fight for those resources to come back to our community, and that we match up those of us who want to work, and there are plenty, with work. In 2000, when Increment took office, the unemployment rate was less than 10%. That means 90% of us was working. In 15 years, it's over 30%. Black folks in this community didn't wake up one day and say, I don't want to go to work. We have to make sure that we return livable work to this community.
Time is spent. Thank you. This next question I'm going to ask is very long, and most of it is some background information before we get to the actual question. According to a report submitted October 30th, 2014 by Jamie Reed, the Chief Procurement Officer, the City of Chicago made $531 million in payments against contracts between January 2014 and September 2014. Of the total payments made during this period, 29% went to minority-owned business enterprises and 7% went to WBEs. Of this amount, African American firms were paid $61.7 million, or 12% in 2014, as compared to 11% in 2013. Yet African American citizens make over 33% of Chicago's population. One of the reasons that can be attributed to this disparity is vendors that have been found in violation of minority goals for contracts through fraudulent bidding, post-award distribution of work, subcontractor intimidation, etc. Current fines appear insufficient to promote compliance. Question: do you support and will you advocate for an ordinance to preclude a company from bidding or being a sole source recipient of a sister agency or city contract for a 2-year period on new city business or large additions to existing contracts if they are found to be in violation of the city or sister agency MBE, WBE, DBE goals? Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I don't want, I'm confused. I'm sorry. It's a lot of information, background information, which I appreciate, but I'm still not clear on what is being asked. I apologize, but I'm unclear on what's being asked.
It's basically asking if you find violations in the contracts with them being in compliance with minority-owned and women-owned businesses, will you support and advocate for an ordinance to preclude the company from being able to bid?
So you mean if companies fraudulently display themselves as being minority-owned, but they're not, or women-owned, but they're not, would I ask for a moratorium on them getting businesses for the city?
It looks like a 2-year period, so something of
Yes.
a moratorium.
I want black people, black contractors working, because when black contractors work, they're gonna hire more black people. We need the work. No, I will not support, I will support an ordinance that will put a moratorium on people who are lying about that, to get city contracts. There are more than enough viable black businesses, black contractors, that you should not have to misrepresent yourself. That's a lack of integrity. We need the work, we need the businesses in our community. We have to stave off this unemployment in our community. When black businesses get equity, they're going to employ other black folks, and we need that in the 37th Ward.
Thank you. This next question is from the audience, and you have 1 minute to respond. As a freshman alderman, how will you work with the other 49 aldermen if they are not interested in you?
I'm accustomed to working with difficult people. I'm not daunted by the task of working with difficult people. My job is not to make friends and neighbors in the 37th Ward. My job is to know the issues, make sure my neighborhood knows the issues, and advocate and fight so that my neighbors get the best possible resources, jobs in this city. That's what my job is to do. Now, I'm sure for any relationship, there is middle ground. The task that I am afforded with is finding the middle ground, something that I and the neighbors of the 37th Ward can live with and not feel sold out by, like our alderman.
Thank you. This next question, you have 1 minute to respond. What is your plan to decrease and eliminate gang violence in the 37th Ward?
Work! When our people work, we are safer. When we can make sure that we put quality programs into our buildings, not criminalize our young people before they even leave elementary school, make sure that we provide opportunities for work, will make our communities safer. Stop kicking our babies out of school, and make sure that we put the programs necessary in to engage them and attract them and keep them in school. When our people are safer, we are safer when we work. Again, I can't over-enforce that there is no direct correlation or relationship to poverty and violence. We have to make sure our people are working to stave off the violence in our community. That is what we must do.
Thank you. This is a yes or no question. It has been documented that the Chicago Housing Authority, CHA, has a cash reserve of over $400 million of public tax money intended for assisting families in obtaining low-income housing. Considering CHA just accepted 280,000 applications for low-income housing, do you agree with the NAACP that the entire amount should be used for vouchers to be issued to low-income families in order to find housing in Chicago, not the suburbs?
Absolutely. We have 20,000 homeless children in the city of Chicago. Those 20,000 children are connected to 20,000 parents who are also homeless in the city of Chicago. That is unconscionable. They knew when they devastated and dismantled public housing that that was going to devastate black communities, that was in addition going to dismantle the voting blocks in black communities. It is imperative that all of that money is used to house our homeless in the city of Chicago where they were displaced. I also want to go back Because it was my mother who was the only person in the city of Chicago at the height of the gang crisis that was the only person able to facilitate a gang truce in the city of Chicago. Again, this is a failure of imagination on our leadership that we cannot go talk to our brothers and sisters about this way of life that's devastating our communities. They need work, they need engagement, they need to be listened to, and all of that needs to take place in our communities right now.
How would you rate the performance of the Chicago Police Department? What specific recommendations would you make to enhance public safety in your ward? You have a minute, 30 seconds for this question.
More black officers, more Latino officers. If you are sworn to serve and protect, we should have officers that reflect us in our community. We need to revitalize the CAP programs in our community. I enjoy the relationship with Brother Duncan, who will help me to facilitate some very difficult relationships and have some difficult conversations that we must have because our communities are unsafe. Our babies are unsafe. We should not have mothers clutching their pearls wondering if their baby's gonna get back from school because they gotta put them on a bus to even go to school. We need to make sure that there are schools in our community and that our communities are safe and that our people are working. That is it. We must be responsible for making sure that happens. We have a failure of leadership in the 37th Ward. It is time to bring that to an end. The failed policies of Rahm Emanuel and Daley and no carrying of the word and for them by Emma Mix have devastated our communities.
I'm going to give you a moment to breathe.
Thank you.
The follow-up question to that is a yes or no answer. Do you believe the Safe Passage Initiative has improved safety for kids going to and from school in the ward?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, you want me to ask it again?
Thank you.
Do you believe that the Safe Passage Initiative has improved safety for kids going to and from school in the ward? Yes or no is all you have to give.
No. The creation of that program indicates violence. It indicates that our babies are going to be unsafe. The fact that you even had to create a safe passage program for black and Latino children in their neighborhood indicates that they knew it was going to be violent on the front end. So this city intentionally put our babies in harm's way.
I knew she would give a little more. Are you ready for the next one?
Yes.
Okay. We are partnering to host a Restoring Justice Summit for Chicagoland communities on April 11th. What is your definition of restorative justice? You have 1 minute for this question.
Bringing back, restoring. We need to restore our babies because they are not lost commodities. That's what happens in these schools where they just kick our babies out. And in charter schools are far more punitive than our regular neighborhood schools. They suspend our kids and kick our kids out. So in some schools 7-1, in other schools 15-1 in Chicago public schools. So we have to stop criminalizing our children before they even get to the street. Yes, I was the only person on these panels to fight for restorative justice, to fight for peer juries in our school, to fight for an elected representative school board which restored democracy to our schools. In most charter schools, they don't even have an LSC, which is eliminating the parental voice. We need all of that at stake because this is what it is no accident that they have the prison to school pipeline. Our children have become commodities both in school and on this pipeline. We have to bring an end to this because our children are not safe. They're being criminalized at school, they're being stopped and frisked in the street, and they're not making it home. We have to stop this, and we can only do that with all stakeholders involved, engaged, and restoring the CAPS program, which worked. In its inception, worked to make our communities safer and our children safer.
Thank you. We have just a couple more questions from the audience. This next question, and you have 1 minute to respond. What is your stance on the Illinois conceal and carry law?
We know what's going on in our neighborhood, in all of our neighborhoods, across the city and across this country. Conceal and carry is the law. As a legislator, I will uphold the law. But I must push back and say the real problem is the illegal guns that keep finding their way into our communities. That is the real question. That is really what this conversation is about. And as long as we keep redirecting the hard conversations, our communities will not be safe. We have the responsibility to make sure that our communities are safe, that our children make it home. It is not about fighting the law. It's about making sure that the law is equitable and that there's parity in the law, specifically for communities of color, that we are not being criminalized in our communities, that we are not being shot blindly in our communities. We have a lot of work to do to make our communities safe, and the first place that starts with is making sure that we have work in our communities, that our neighborhood schools are properly resourced so that we are graduating the kind of citizens that will be responsible and contribute to the fabric of our community.
Thank you.
The last question from us on the panel. What is the biggest political difference between you and your opponent? Why should that difference motivate residents to vote for you? One more. How does that difference reflect that you should serve as a 37th Ward Alderman instead of your opponent? You have 2 minutes to answer this question.
The biggest difference is obvious. I'm here. In a room full of concerned citizens, I'm here. The other difference is that I'm an unbought, unbossed, unbowed, independent thinker. I will not carry the water for the man who is seeking to destroy us and help him in the devastation and the demolition of our community. That is the biggest difference between me and my opponent, that I value and respect the presence, the time of the neighbors in our community who want to have an educated voice about what decisions they will make about the leadership of this ward.
Thank you. So that concludes the question and answer portion of this forum. We wanted to offer you, Ms. Stamps, a 2-minute closing, so an opportunity to talk to the concerned citizens for 2 minutes.
Listen, neighbors, we in trouble. Since 2000, when Emma Mitz took office, we have lost 2,000 jobs in the 37th Ward. Red light cameras alone have taken $500,000 out of the pockets of poor folks in this community in the last 6 months alone. Our schools have been turned around and privatized and given over to private people to line their pockets on the backs of our children while giving money away. $3 million. $3 million she voted on that was cuts to our schools and our communities. She cut jobs. She voted to cut jobs for city employees. The question really is, are we any better off 15 years later? I think not. Under the failed policies of Daley and the failed policies of Rahm Emanuel, and her unwavering support and her colluding with them for our simultaneous destruction and the structural racism that we are under assault in the 37th Ward will kill us. There is one choice. Stand up, fight back. Stand up, vote for Tara Stamps. April 7th, Punch 55. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Stamps, for coming out.